Welcome to Tone Talks. Welcome to Tone Talks. Welcome to Tone Talks. How's everybody doing today? This is Antonio Moore. I wanted to have a discussion about a lawsuit that all of us should be paying attention to, but none of us really are. It's probably the biggest lawsuit for black folks in the last 50 years since civil rights. And it's the lawsuit of Byron Allen with Comcast. It's a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit. I believe $20 billion is the tag. And here you have one of the wealthiest black men in America suing Comcast, and basically won against Comcast in the Ninth Circuit, and now Comcast is trying to get him to reverse the decision in the Supreme Court. You basically have a major multinational conglomerate. You try and take a single black man to the Supreme Court to reverse a law that has been on the books to protect slaves since the Emancipation Proclamation. And so I just want to have the discussion of why that law exists, what it is, and then the fact that the Urban League, the NAACP, the Congressional Black Caucus, all the presidential candidates have all avoided this, and some of them actually are taking money from Comcast at the same time, and it's a major conflict. Let's have the discussion. So let's talk about who's suing who. So initially, Byron Allen, who now owns the Weather Channel, it's one black man. Understand that most of these 24-hour news networks, major networks, are owned by conglomerates. In a nation that had slavery and Jim Crow, a black man in Byron Allen, possibly one of the wealthiest black men in America at this point, bought the Weather Channel and owns it entirely. It's a 24-hour news network that a black man owns entirely. It is a direct affront to everything that race is and basically was allowed to become in America. And now we see what the reaction is to that. Oh, they can't own nothing. We can let them be part of the diversity officers, or we'll give them $1 million for a college fund. But as far as owning channels, owning cable lines, owning pieces of America, we're not gonna let that happen. And so I look at this thing, and you also got to understand at the same time, Byron Allen is the only black person in America that can take a movie from production to distribution with no approvals from studios. Understand the threat of power that represents. Now, we can't help but understand Byron in the context of Bob Johnson. You know, bought BET, made it into what it was, made himself into a billionaire. They don't want that to happen again. So now, what essentially happened with Byron is that what he wanted was a model whereby instead of producing shows for you like Shonda Rhimes does or like Lee Daniel does, and you pay me a fee and you own the content, I'll produce the show. I just want my money from ad dollars. Understand there are other white producers that are doing this right now. There's nobody black doing it. But understand that once we try to do it, all the rules change. We don't want to meet with you. He's already sued AT&T for $10 billion and settled. So these are real lawsuits. AT&T for $10 billion, Comcast for $20 billion, Charter for I believe another $10 to $20 billion. Multi-billion-dollar lawsuits. He already settled with AT&T and owns 7 channels. Not the way that Oprah owned Discovery. I'm talking about singularly owns inside of his entertainment studios 7 channels. Now, inside of a larger narrative, a larger discussion of American descendants of slavery, having a talk about reparations, we got to understand that reparations has to include some ownership. See, we got to own our own message. We got to own how we're projected on the TV. We got to own the fact that they don't want us to own anything. Now, we're going to get into whether the NAACP, the Urban League, the Black Caucus have done the necessary supportive briefs to support this black man being sued by Comcast for basically protecting the rights of black folks to do business in America. They haven't, though. We got to look at what boards that Comcast sits on and why they sit there. We not taking no crumbs no more. See, I think we got to understand where we're at, how we got here. American descendants of slavery initiated a whole discussion around reparations. But it's not just about what the government does. It's not just about the past. This is the moment where we recognize whether we are being treated fairly and who is against us and who is for us. See, I'm looking at this thing and I gotta back up and explain to y'all some details. I told y'all about Byron. Let me tell you about Comcast. This entity, this massive entity built a bunch of cable lines in black communities. And now what we don't understand is we talk about being 14% of the population. But what we don't understand is we built America. So as a result, we have a footstone in America that goes beyond our percentage in America. See, we're 40% of the subscribers for Comcast. We are 40%. But you know how much of their ad dollars that we see? Next to none. You know how much of the ownership we have of the channels? Next to none. This law that Byron is using, this law that we've been ignoring, doesn't just apply in cable. It applies in all businesses. But let's look at the law. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 is one of the only laws on the books that's for us, the descendants of slavery in America. See, what this law does is it forces white businesses, it forces the government to do business with black folks, because it was a recognition at that moment that should be in place today that nobody wants to do business with ADOS black folks. So here we are looking at the consequence of being black in America. Here we are looking at the consequence of all of the realities of our lives. And Byron Allen is bringing this lawsuit. And it allows us to frame this discussion of who we are, what we gonna own, how this reparations is gonna work. See, we're not just talking ideally. See, you gotta understand that when I talk, I have the video and I'm gonna cut a little bit in here where I talk to Byron. But I've talked to Byron almost 100 hours. And we're talking about one of the wealthiest black men in America, bar none. Whether y'all understand it or not. He bought the Weather Channel by himself for cash, $300 million, black man. And what we see now is that the government is not providing the protections that the descendants of slavery deserve, that allow us to continue to own businesses and to be American. Let's talk. So let's look at this Civil Rights Act of 1866. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 also said that any citizen has the same right that a white citizen has to make and enforce contracts, sue and be sued, give evidence in court, and inherit, purchase, lease, sell, hold, and convey real and personal property. Understand, they're talking in a moment where there are no other groups. They're talking in a moment where there's whites and then there's descendants of American slavery, 1866. So when they say any citizen, they're saying that slaves need to be allowed to do business. So the Civil Rights Act of 1866 basically gave citizens, black citizens, the same rights as white citizens to make and enforce contracts, sue and be sued, give evidence in court, inherit, purchase, lease, sell, hold, and convey real and personal property. In 1866, this was a black and white country. This was a black and ADOS country with white folks. I think in a lot of ways we're not unpacking where this country has been and the realities of the laws on the books and why they exist. We just had the article come out today on the Atlantic about how much land was stolen from black folks. That is the land you develop, cable lines, orange groves, potato farms. That is the land that makes you the ownership class in the country. I don't know if you can fix that without fixing the realities of what Comcast is doing today. See, this law basically makes it so that Comcast has to do business with black folks, ADOS folks. Now, the whole issue hinges on a very simple thing I want to make sure everybody understands. Comcast wants to make it so we have to prove that race was the only reason they didn't do business. That's a bar too high. See, as it stands, all we have to prove, based on the Ninth Circuit, is that race was one of the reasons. Byron Allen has already won in the Ninth Circuit under that. You have Comcast trying to dwindle away, trying to cut away at civil rights laws, while the NAACP and the Urban League and the Black Caucus are either silent or taking money from them. ADOS, I want y'all to understand today is a call to action. Today is a day that we understand that reparations isn't just about the presidential candidates and getting a vote in. It's about the realities of understanding the world that surrounds you. November 16th, this is heard in the Supreme Court. Where are the amicus briefs Where are the supportive actions from everybody from the same Al Sharpton that's got the show on NBC, the MSNBC that's under Comcast? Where are the actions by the NAACP? See, I'm going to bring up a memorandum of understanding that all these people signed with Comcast that gives us as black folks nothing. It's a memorandum of understanding that says nothing for black folks, for ADOS folks. See, we built America. We are owed a debt here. And we are here to claim that debt. But to claim that debt, we have to actionably look at the realities of what's in our control. See, today we can make calls to the Congressional Black Caucus. Today we can flood the emails of the Urban League. Today we can send letters off to the NAACP and visit our local chapters. Today is the day that we can actually say, where are the amicus briefs? Because Comcast is trying to take our rights. Let's talk. Let's read a little more on this thing. The act used language very similar to that of the Equal Protection Clause in the newly proposed 14th Amendment. In particular, the act discussed the need to provide reasonable protections to all persons in their constitutional rights of equality before the law, without distinction of race or color or previous condition of slavery or involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the parties shall have been duly convicted. The statute was a major part of a general federal policy during Reconstruction and was closely related to the Second Freedmen's Bureau Act of 1866. This is the discussion that binds reparations. This is part of the reality of making us whole. See, there's no way that you can let Comcast do what they're doing and understand and support reparations. See, Comcast is basically trying to make it so we can't use this law. Once they make it so that we got to prove that race is the only reason, how can we prove that? How can we prove that in an America that no longer is just a slavery America and has so many people willing to take money from y'all? We can't. But what we can prove is this one of the reasons. And once we prove it's one of the reasons, then it should be over. That's a bar that never should have been passed. So I'm looking at this thing and I look at this ruling and I want y'all to understand that this is real. When I say billions, it becomes fantastical for some people where you can't understand it or grasp it. Comcast challenges a ruling allowing a $20 billion lawsuit to move forward. A black man is suing Comcast for $20 billion and already won in the Ninth Circuit. And now Comcast is trying to drag him into the Supreme Court to dwindle away at the rights of all of us. Because this law allows us not just to go after Comcast. It allows us to go after Wells Fargo. Are you doing business with black folks? It allows us to ask the federal government who does pensions, are you doing business with black investment bankers? It allows us to challenge America on whether they want us and allow us to be American. See, Comcast, they got to understand that we here now, ADOS, and we got a gate up now. But for them to understand, you have to do your part. You have to get active. See, I'm looking at this thing, and the U.S. Supreme Court will be examining standards in racial discrimination lawsuits. On Monday, the justices of the High Court announced that they had accepted for review a case claiming discrimination in contracting against Comcast in alleged violation of Section 1981 of the Civil Rights Act. The $20 billion lawsuit comes from Byron Allen's Entertainment Studios Network, an African-American owned programmer upset over the way that cable TV distributors refused to make good offers to license his channels. Comcast, as well as Charter, in a separate case, petitioned for review. They petitioned for review after Byron Allen's company survived scrutiny in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. In Comcast's petition, handled by Miguel Estrada at Gibson Dunn, the cable company argued that in order to carry a discrimination suit, plaintiffs must show in pleadings that racial animus was the motivating factor leading to a programming decision. We can never prove that, and we don't need to prove that. The fact that you don't have black people of any large number getting any ad dollars is all that we need to prove. Do you understand? When you look in the memorandum of understanding, a company that does $1 billion in ads did $7 million in ads with minorities. That's it, or something. I'm gonna read it to you in a second so you don't, all the facts is straight. I'm telling you today that we can't have no wealth, no ownership, if we can't at least have it in entertainment. We got a bunch of people running around and none of them own nothing that they running around on. Here we got the black man that owns the Weather Channel going to the Supreme Court on November 16th, and ain't nobody in Hollywood said nothing. Let's talk. I think for a lot of us, we don't understand without this law, we easily could end up broke forever. This is the type of law that if we were to get trillions of dollars in reparations, we can funnel through and actually activate that trillions of dollars and not just be consumers. We gotta understand that part of what you see is this thing right here, this memorandum of understanding. I want you guys to understand. I'm gonna put this link in the description. There's so many parts that are just questionable. All they're talking about is diversity, diversity, diversity. Signed by Al Sharpton and Mark Morial. All of them signed this document. None of it delivers any ownership or any real deliverables to a black America that deserves it all. Understand that Al Sharpton and them, they signed this thing and basically admits that Comcast don't do business with black folks. It admits the fact that black folks get a pittance of the ad dollars. One part it actually says that they did between 2006 and 2009, Comcast did $1.3 billion with minority-owned vendors. Then if you flip to the next page, it says in 2009, Comcast spent $84 million with over 130 African-American owned businesses. That ain't even ADOS. So billions went out to minorities, women, Latinos. We saw a couple $1 million. And if you go to ADOS, we probably saw next to nothing. American descendants of slavery. Understand that if you flip to another page, in 2009, NBCU spent almost $34 million with businesses owned and operated by African Americans. But you don't even understand that they spend billions of dollars generally. And from 2006 to 2009, NBCU spent over $650 million with diverse suppliers. We're seeing nothing, but we're all the consumers. We're 40% of their consumer base. In addition, listen to this. Comcast and NBCU jointly will commit at least an additional $7 million in spending on advertising with minority-owned media. We won't see any of that. We'd be lucky to see $1 million of that as African Americans. ADOS is lucky to see 100,000. This is the deal that Mark Morial and the NAACP and Al Sharpton signed in 2010. Right around when Al gets his show and everything, right? Understand that nobody is looking out for you like ADOS is looking out for you. I want you to read this whole document, but the real call to action is we need them, the NAACP, the Congressional Black Caucus, and the Urban League to do amicus briefs supporting Byron Allen, saying that this law is not about Byron Allen's lawsuit. It's about this law needs to be read in a way where we don't have to prove up that race is the motivating factor. We just need to prove that race is one of the factors. It needs to be read broadly, not narrowly. Because if it's read narrowly, we can't even use the law. Because they hide everything. We don't get any access. They got all the information. This is where we're at. We need to have the discussion. Y'all need to get out. I'm going to put some contacts for the NAACP and for the Urban League and for the Congressional Black Caucus. You can go to your local Congressional Black Caucus and call them up and email them and make it known that you want them to do a brief in support of this lawsuit that's going to be heard in November. This is one of the biggest lawsuits in black history, and ain't nobody talking about it. Ain't nobody in black Hollywood willing to risk their little position because they got a position that actually hurts the rest of the black folks. We here for ownership. We here to demand that we get access. I need ADOS to get on this because this ties in to a greater call for reparations from the federal government. We need the tools that allow us to actually bring claims. Our tools. Your tools, your family's tools, things that allow for us to make it clear that Wells Fargo ain't doing business with us, that Comcast ain't doing business with us, that the federal government is not doing business with us, that there is no black business because they're not doing business with us. This is Tone Talks. I just wanted to come to you briefly, read up on this case, get to your Congressional Black Caucus, the Urban League, and the NAACP, and let's make these people let us know. Now, in addition, I will say the presidential candidates need to come out. If you get to Kamala or Cory Booker, they need to let it be known what their position is. Do they plan to support a black man that owns the Weather Channel being brought to the Supreme Court? See, I'm not here for no games. I'm gonna let y'all hear Byron speak for himself. I interviewed him a few years back. I'm gonna cut that in, a section of it, so you can hear the interview, because I'm here to make sure that we all hold everybody to task. This is Tone Talks. Please go to tonetalks.org to subscribe and donate. Share this video. I don't know if y'all understand, but this is that moment that we've been waiting a lifetime to hear. Of African American owned media.
I started the National Association of African American Owned Media because I feel it's important that we as a people own and control our image and how we're produced and depicted around the world. And I have said to a lot of people, especially white people, would you be comfortable if I had control over how you were produced and how your children grew up and saw themselves? If they saw themselves as heroes or if they saw themselves as losers. Are you comfortable with that image and me having that control? And unanimously, everyone always says no. And I say, then why should I be comfortable letting you have 100% control over how I'm produced and depicted and distributed around the world and how my children grow up and see themselves? So we must own our own networks and our own platforms and websites and publications that we truly own, and we're not a front for wealthy white people, but we truly own it and control the narrative. That is the reason.
Can you explain that a little bit more when you say, because I've heard that before from you, and I think sometimes it gets lost. In more specific sense, can you explain the difference between black targeted and black owned companies?
Black targeted is black targeted. That doesn't mean that the people who actually own it and care about how you're produced and seen own it and control it. I mean, you want that to be authentic. The ownership needs to be, like, I had the pleasure of growing up with Ebony and Jet on my coffee table, and I knew that I could trust that publication because I knew who owned it, and they were really about inspiring the African American community and helping us to go to the next level. And at the same time, they chronicled all of our successes and made sure that we paid respect to the people who deserve that respect, who had gone on to achieve exceptional levels of success. I think it's important that we have that in our community, and unfortunately we don't, because a lot of advertisers have pushed us to the side, and a lot of distribution systems have pushed us to the side. Now, the reason why I sued, now it's a big deal.
Wait, can I ask you one question? Just so the audience who isn't as aware. When we look at BET, when we look at Aspire, are these black targeted or black owned companies?
They're black targeted, and they're black. Viacom owns BET, and Aspire. We're asking through legal documents to understand the relationship of Leo Hendry and Aspire. So we want to know, because we want to have real, authentic, 100% African American ownership of these platforms. We deserve it. Look, the cable industry. This is why I say, hey, black people, wake up and get a calculator. You're a multi-trillion-dollar industry, but you get paid nothing. The cable industry spends $70 billion a year licensing cable networks. $70 billion. Black people get zero. We're the only community that would allow that to happen. No other community would stand for that. We do business with a lot of major corporations. Coca-Cola, they don't spend a nickel with black-owned media for the most part. There are a lot of major corporations out there that pull money out of our neighborhoods, out of our communities, but they're not. See, what happens is, here is that institutionalized racism. When white people talk to other white people about business, they talk about business. When black people go to white corporate America starts talking about charity, donations, and who they've given money to. We're not a charity. We're not a donation. We're not that burden that you need to subsidize because we are a bunch of stupid baboons who can't add 2 + 2. We're a business. We're brilliant. We're resourceful. We're articulate. We're competitive. But white corporate America has a way of treating us like we're a burden and we don't count. And when you look at all the hundreds of billions of dollars that are spent in advertising and none of it going to black-owned media, that speaks to why your newspapers and websites are going out of business and going away, and they don't exist. When you look at $70 billion being spent licensing cable networks and none of it going to black ownership, that speaks to jobs in the community. Now, for me, as an African-American entrepreneur, to sue the first African-American president of the United States for racial discrimination in contracting, there is a severe problem. Now, let's talk about the law that I use. It is Civil Rights Act 1866, Section 1981. It was put on the books to protect the newly freed slaves 150 years ago, to make sure that we had economic inclusion, because they knew 150 years ago we weren't going to get that economic inclusion. And here we are today, we still haven't achieved it. So I had to sue President Obama's FCC to give him a wake-up call and say, President Obama, listen up. You need to understand that your administration for Black America has been a Category 5 disaster. Under President Obama, unemployment for Black America has gone up 40%. During the same period, it has gone down 25% for white America. This is off of his own website, .gov. Okay? Under President Obama, Black home ownership is at a 25-year low. So Black America, we're not living the American dream, we're living the American nightmare.
So again, let me say this to everybody. I just want to make sure everybody understands who they're listening to right now. You're listening to one of the 4 Black billionaires, and he's just laying it out for you. And I think sometimes, people, just because they don't see your face on television, they don't know you in the same sense as Oprah, that they don't understand that you're really out here laying out the information so everybody can get context from another perspective outside of their own home, why they're struggling, and so that then they can demand change. You know what I'm saying?
Demand change. And what I said to President Obama, look, we Black people, we died for you to be in the White House. Literally died, okay, for you to be there. Real simple things you can do that nobody can veto or block. It's not even possible, okay? Stop approving mergers that do not have real, true African-American economic inclusion. That is simple for you to do, and that is simple for you to audit and enforce. Also, you spent, President Obama, $700 billion, that's with a B, $700 billion to bail out the banks. Why don't you audit the banks? And you will see that the banks are not lending money to Black people. And therefore, Black people can't buy homes. Therefore, Black people cannot start businesses. We're not getting business loans. And therefore, we can't start businesses, buy businesses, and grow our businesses and employ people in our community. You bailed out the banks. Why don't you audit the banks and enforce the laws that are on the books? Make sure they're lending money to Black people. This makes a stronger America. President Obama, you control a $2 billion ad budget. Join the Army, join the Navy, join the Marines. President Obama, none of that money is making its way to Black-owned media, Black websites, Black newspapers, Black-owned radio stations, Black television shows. Nothing.
Can you give context for that? Because you told me once about a kind of a roundabout number of how much Go Army, Go Navy had given to
$2 billion a year.
No, but how much they had did with black business last year?
Nothing. I mean, practically nothing. Bill Clinton mandated that the government spend money with Black-owned media, and it was a presidential mandate, and it was ignored. And to Kerry's Senator, he was Senator Kerry, now Secretary Kerry, to his credit, he opened up an investigation to find out why this mandate had been ignored. And not only did it not improve, it got worse from when Clinton said, guys, we are spending $2 billion a year. Make sure Black-owned media is included. This is one of the few presidential mandates ever ignored, because when it comes time to spend money with Black people, we're supposed to be nothing but consumers and slaves making minimum wage, living in a neighborhood that most people don't want to travel to. Now, here's another big thing that I am the White House's worst enemy, a Negro with a calculator. So the government, President Obama knows that the government pension fund money for government workers is $1 trillion. government worker pension fund, all the people who worked at these pension funds, worked for the government, their pension funds. None of that is making its way to black communities, black professional money managers, and making its way into our communities. So you're asking us, America's asking black America to run the same race without any tennis shoes on a bunch of glass. And all we're saying is it's time to get to the table and provide real economic inclusion. There's some real big problems out there. These pension funds that are buying businesses, and a lot of that pension fund money is coming from women and people of color. And those are the people who work, and their money goes into these pension funds, and then there's so-called professional pension fund managers, and none of that money, trillions, and I mean trillions, not millions, not billions, I moved on to the T's, trillions of dollars being invested, no economic inclusion for African. Obama's administration to say, President Obama, you know better. We trusted you because we considered you family, but you don't treat us like family. And part of it is our fault as black people. Look, we have to be smarter about it. The Jewish community was brilliant. They had an ask. They said, look, we want more protection for Israel. The Hispanic community, brilliant. They have an ask. They say we want immigration reform. The gay community, they were brilliant. They had an ask. They said they wanted gay marriage, and they got it. Black community, not so brilliant. We didn't have a real clear, definitive ask where we organized and said, you must deliver this. Other communities were very clear and wouldn't let up. They were united. We must be clear that we must have economic inclusion, and we must have it now, because the party's over. The moving trucks are going to be coming to the White House in less than a year. And what you're going to have is all of a sudden black people are going to look around and go, that was really nice. That was some nice photos, but I'm broke. Yes, you went backwards. Who would have ever thought that you get the first black president and black people would go backwards economically? Well, guess what? Your nightmare is true. And it's time to wake up and demand that corporate America includes you because it's rightfully yours.
Yeah, and so I go back to the analogy that you gave earlier, and right after that, I really want to get into the lawsuit and why you added Al Sharpton, because I think it really is poignant for this moment of conversation. But so often we hear this race analogy, this running race where white people got a head start. And I guess my fundamental problem with that is when I sit back, it does a disservice to what happened to black people, because it doesn't really account to the fact that we were the shoes. We weren't a runner in the race, and we just started late. No, we were their shoes, their shoelaces, and now it's kind of like you want the shoes to race with you. And you tell the shoes that they're a person so that the shoes don't understand there's a hole in you because they raced on top of you for years and years and years. When we see these commercial businesses that are in our communities, like Nick's Check Cashing, things like that, we forget that people own those companies. I think it's so often we look at it as though it's an oppressive government that created subprime. No, individuals sold subprimes to you with the banks. And I feel like until we really acknowledge the reality of what slavery was, and particularly Jim Crow was, in terms of advantage, in terms of opportunity, and in terms of oppression, we can't move forward. And that's kind of where you're at.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, you have to get on parity. You have to say, look, I say black America, good luck waiting for another black president and a black attorney general simultaneously. Mm-hmm. Nothing's happening without those two signatures of significance in this country. You need to put pressure on the banks. You need to put pressure on immigration reform. If our children aren't educated, then they're going to live a life of minimum wage. And minimum wage isn't enough to keep your head above water. Half the women in this country are living at or below the poverty line. And if the women fail, the foundation of the country, so likely will the children. I was very fortunate. My mother went to UCLA. She got her master's degree in cinema TV production. If my beautiful mother had not gone to UCLA, a high-end university, and gotten a master's degree in cinema TV production, it wouldn't have positioned me for success. And it's not a coincidence that her son has 40 television shows on the air and 7 24-hour HD networks. Your children position you for success. We have to get in there. And what I expected from President Obama was education reform and economic inclusion for all Americans, including African Americans, the furthest left behind. And this is something that's a matter of national security. This is something that's a matter of global competitiveness, because we as Americans are only 327 million people out of a global population of 7 billion people. Mm-hmm. Now, China has 2/3 of our nation, 200 million kids in college. 200 million kids in college in China. 2/3 of our nation. You can't compete when you have 2/3 of your nation in college in China and half of your nation here is living at or below the poverty line. In order to compete as a nation and to maintain our status globally, all minds must be on deck. Every mind needs to be fully engaged and maximized to its fullest potential to be a great America. These are simple numbers that are indisputable. We must engage everyone. And this is why I took this law that's been on the books 150 years and gave it to my lawyers and said, I will pay you millions of dollars. We must engage now. We must get everyone thinking and fighting in the right direction to provide the fourth and final chapter, to achieve the fourth and final chapter. The real reason why they killed Martin Luther King. Economic inclusion. So all Americans, including African Americans, the furthest left behind. Now remember where they shot and killed Martin Luther King. On the balcony of the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis. Why was he there? He was there to march on behalf of the low pay to the sanitation workers there in Memphis. And they killed him right there because he was going to deliver at one point 500,000 people to the nation's capital, to the Poor People's March. It was about economic inclusion. Now we, as a people, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, everybody, we must fight for economic fairness and economic justice for everyone because that's what makes a stronger America. And this is what we must do. Now, why did I sue Charter? Here's Charter. Charter is trying to buy Time Warner Cable for $55 billion and become the second largest cable operator in the world. Broadband. They want to control broadband in America. It's number 2 to Comcast. Charter has an all-white male board. They do not have one woman, which represents 60% of the global population. They don't have a woman on their board. They don't have a Hispanic on their board. They don't have an African American on their board. They don't have an Asian American on their board. How can you, President Obama, I understand why these guys want to continue to discriminate against us, but we didn't vote for you to be in the White House to help them. You shouldn't even have a conversation with them. They're saying, now here's the MOU they did with Al Sharpton, which is why I sued Al Sharpton in the Comcast lawsuit for $20 billion. The MOU that this guy signed was with Charter. If the merger goes through, if, and I mean you need to pay attention to the word if, we will add an African American, a Hispanic, a woman within 2 years. If. No, it's not if. It's not about if. It is when you do those things, then come back to us. It's like a guy coming to you and saying, you know what, Antonio, I really want to get a job with you. And then Antonio says, you know, man, I noticed here that, you know, when I got some research on you, you beat your wife up 5 times. And the guy says, you know what, Antonio, I did beat her up 5 times, but if Antonio, you give me the job, I'll never do it again. This last point. Charter spends $6 billion a year licensing cable networks. $6 billion. Negroes get 0. Mm-hmm. And this is how much they don't care about diversity. Charter doesn't even have a chief diversity officer that might cost them $80,000 a year, $100,000 a year. They don't even spend $100,000 a year to pretend like they care about Negroes. So I'm saying to President Obama, I understand, in my opinion, they're racist. I understand they're discriminatory. But we didn't die to put you in the White House to support them. And that's why I sued President Obama's FCC for $10 billion. The racism can stop with the man we sent to D.C. to stop it. And I'm demanding that he steps up and delivers us what he promised the people, and deliver to the people, especially the African Americans who risked their lives and lost their lives to fix this for once and for all. Because right now, black people have nothing to show for the Obama administration. Absolutely nothing. They've been positioned to fail. You didn't give them the right education. You didn't give them opportunity, mentorship, and jobs. You gave them every reason to fail. And then for you to say that criminals and thugs, I'm like, no, they're not. These are young men who want better, can do better, desire to do better, and you have failed them and haven't positioned them for success. Now, when those white bikers went through and shot up all those people and shot up that place, President Obama never called them a name. He never commented on them. And he never said anything about those white people that went through those neighborhoods doing that. And I'm just saying, dude, you got to be fair. I honestly don't need you at black funerals singing Negro spirituals. I've got Al Green. I need you back at the White House putting pressure on banks to lend money to black people. That's what black people need. I need you putting pressure on corporations who do business with the government to make sure they're actually doing business with black people. That's what black people need. I need you at the White House putting pressure on really getting some education reform, doing something where we're really getting these kids properly educated and placed into colleges so they have a strong 4-year degree. I need you investing in the community and all people, especially black people, the only ones to have a law to shut us down. Laws to shut us down called Jim Crow.
Absolutely.
I need you there. I don't need you to sing. You know what you need to do, brother. You know what you need to do. I need you to take care of business. What's at stake here, President Obama, is your legacy. You have let black people down severely. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people will sing your praises and drink your black Jesus Kool-Aid all the way till the end of time. They can do that, but at the end of the day, their bank accounts aren't looking good. You know what to do. You are a really bright man. And if you are smart enough to deliver gay marriage, and I'm happy you did, and I'm thrilled you did, you are smart enough to deliver economic inclusion for all Americans, especially African Americans, and to deliver a better education, and you have done nothing in those categories. And that's why I have had to file lawsuits against Charter, against your own FCC, and against Comcast. Comcast isn't really doing business with black people. Why don't you go and investigate that? Why don't you look at the books? Why don't you follow the money flow? See where the money is flowing to. Why don't you look at that? You said you were going to do it. Live up to your word. Do not come out of the White House and have your legacy be black people have fallen further behind. That is unacceptable. I'm not looking to rally the troops and have this be a debate. Politico asked me today, why did you hire lobbyists to be a part of the debate? I don't care about the debate. Black people are dying every day while we debate. Okay, the debate is over. Every day we got new bodies on the streets, just blood flowing through the streets. This is taking action. I filed federal lawsuits, and I'm going to continue to file them until corporate America shows black America that black America is due. There's so many corporations that don't do business with black America, and that leads to our economic genocide, which is a direct result of our violence. We have to address this economically. That's the only thing that's going to stop it. And I love Coretta Scott King because Coretta Scott King told Martin Luther King, you listen to Bayard Rustin. You listen to Bayard. And Martin said, who's Bayard? And Coretta said, he's brilliant. He's an African American and he's gay. And Martin said, he's gay. And Coretta said, hey, hold up. We're not just fighting for 1959, she said. We're not just fighting for civil rights for black people. We're fighting for civil rights for all people, including gay people. 1959, Coretta said that. That's why she's the queen of queens, okay? That's why I love that woman more than anything. And it was Bayard Rustin who walked into that room of Southern Baptist ministers and said, yeah, I'm gay. And he said that to Martin Luther King. And he said, hey, this is how we're going to do it. Through economics. We're going to come off the buses. And he was the architect for the Montgomery bus boycott. He's the reason why we broke open the South. It was economics. And I'm saying that Black America, you are on a plantation. We are still slaves. And you still have the shackles on. And it is economic genocide. And you won't be free until you have economic inclusion. And you need to speak now while you have an African American president and an African American attorney general. And you need to be loud and clear and demand what is rightfully yours. And let Obama know this is his legacy. If you come out of here where you have not made improvement in our education and our economic inclusion as it relates to businesses, as it relates to the government ad budget, and as it relates to the $1 trillion that you manage and government worker pension fund money, a lot of African Americans and a lot of women. He has failed us miserably.
And so I guess, you know, one of the applications that we talked about, and you know, you had your own answers at that time. What were your thoughts on this whole uproar about the Oscars earlier this year and the Oscar issue? And then how, you know, we're seeing these celebrities, whether it be 50 Cent, Kanye West. Now this morning you hear about Dwayne Martin and Tisha Campbell. Everybody's going bankrupt. They're going under. How does ownership tie into that? And then how does ownership tie into the Oscar issue and make it relevant or more irrelevant in your mind?
Well, you know, look, I started my company 23 years ago from my dining room table. And I called all 1,300 television stations, and for about a year, they told me no, and I got about 40,000 no's to get 150 yeses. And I went and kept half the advertising time in my television shows. I sold them a 1-hour show, and I kept 7 minutes, and the local TV stations kept 7. And I went and sold my 7 minutes to national advertisers. I now have 40 television shows, the largest privately held television library in the world, about 5,000 hours, and the largest privately held portfolio of television cable networks. I own 7 of them. And one of them's Cars.tv. They're not black targeted. We own Cars.tv, which we won an Emmy for, Pets.tv, Comedy.tv, Recipe.tv, Justice Central, a 24-hour court and legal news channel. So I started 23 years ago. Now, to speak to diversity, I bought a company called Freestyle Releasing. Freestyle distributes movies directly to the movie theaters in America, about 50,000 screens. We deal directly with all the movie theaters, and the theaters send the money directly to us. That's a first. That's a first in the history of this country. We now have a relationship with the theaters directly, and we're putting out...
A first what?
The first African-American owned company to put out 15 to 20 movies a year and to have a relationship directly with the movie theaters in this country. That is a first, where the theaters send me the money, not the studio. We're the studio. It's taken a couple of 100 years to get here, but we're here. And that is a big step. So now, we just put out this weekend, Meet the Blacks with Mike Epps. Well, you know, we put that out. I don't know how much love that movie would have gotten from the other studios. I'm guessing not a lot of love. And we put the movie out. And the producers were very appreciative. You need a place like Freestyle Releasing, which I bought it. I own it 100%, and I bought it so we can have a direct relationship with the theaters. Now we can control how our stories are told, how we're produced, how we're depicted. I mean, look, Race came out. It's about Jesse Owens. Now, it wasn't white America that funded that movie. It was the French that funded that movie about Jesse Owens because they revere him so much. We have to put ourselves in a position to fund that movie and to tell his legacy. That's why I bought Freestyle Releasing, and I paid millions of dollars to do it. because I wanted to make sure we have a direct relationship with every movie theater in this country, all 50,000 screens. And now we have that relationship to go direct and tell our stories. That's how you speak to diversity. Here's the deal. We have the talent in the community. The talent is abundant. As a matter of fact, everybody looks to the talent in this community to figure out what's on point. The talent is off the Richter scale. We have an audience that's underserved. But the problem has been we have management in place that keeps us from getting to the audience. By me buying a distribution company that goes straight to the theaters, I got rid of the management that's been blocking us for decades, and now we're direct. And now we can speak to diversity. And that's the key. Don't, take off your knee pads. Stop begging. Click your heels 3 times, Dorothy. You're already home. You're already special. You're already spectacular. You already have everything you need. You just need to go right to the audience because they've been waiting for you to come home for a long, long time.